attended some together. And he is a serious snorer and a very gifted man. And I think I've always loved his, I really always love his shares. And I hope tonight that he will tell the deer story, one, because that one always makes me cry. And two, I know that he's not one of those guys. A lot of times this is a difficult topic and a lot of people can't think. They're like, how am I going to talk for 30 minutes? You mean I have 30 minutes to an hour if I want to? And then they get into maybe an hour. I know Don can make this. I know Don can give us an hour on this. And I just love the dude. He's a great human being, a good man, and a great example of AA. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on tonight, Don. Take it away, buddy.
Well, I'm Don Landis. I'm an alcoholic. Sam, thank you for that kind invitation. I always think of that word special. He said, we have a special guest tonight. You know, just keep in mind that special in most circles means half off. So just so you know. And yes, I snored Sam right out of our room that we shared outside of Nashville. I was very proud of that. He talked about being an AA member that would go to any length, and a little snoring drove him away. So there you go. And Sam, one question I do have for you: how long do you want me to speak tonight? I don't know the format since it's my first pleasure to be in this meeting.
Usually a minimum of 30 minutes and up to an hour, and some people go for an hour and a half. So the meeting ends and the meeting ends at 9 o'clock our time. So however long you want to do.
Okay, it ends at 9 o'clock your time, 7 o'clock my time, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a what, 2 hour, or it's a
hour and a half?
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll see how this goes. And the reason I ask is I'm familiar with this article. I think that one of the most underutilized tools that we have in our spiritual toolkit in Alcoholics Anonymous is our literature. And the way that we know this is if you've ever been to a business meeting in your home group, and you just hear what people argue about in the business meeting, you realize that all the answers to all these questions are already written in pamphlets that we've been publishing for decades to handle things in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't take advantage of all of our literature. Now, many of us are very familiar with the Big Book and the 12 and 12, but once we cross that bridge, our familiarity with the rest of the literature at our disposal lessens a little bit. And Language of the Heart is such a great book, collection of Bill Wilson's writings. And we're all really a lot of people in AA are familiar with this term, emotional sobriety. It kind of became a buzzword probably 10, 15 years ago. My sobriety date is September 16th, 1991. So I'm at the 29-year mark. And I'll tell you, when I got sober, there was nobody talking about emotional sobriety. I didn't hear a lot about it. And then it's kind of crept in, and people kind of like the sound of it, you know, and particularly because Bill said emotional sobriety, the last frontier. And, oh, you know, what a great hook. Bill was such a great salesman. And I don't think it was his intention, but it grabbed a lot of people's ear when he called it the last frontier. But the reality is, from the beginning, AA has been addressing the types of things that Bill addresses in this article. And I love all of Bill's writings. And one of the things that impresses me the most, actually, about the writing isn't the content, it's the honesty and the transparency of a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, a man who struggled by his own admittance with his ego. Because when you hear him talking about this false dependence on people, this constant need for approval, as the late, great Clancy I used to say, you have to treat me special just so I feel average. Bill Wilson knew all about that. And yet to be able to write with such honesty and transparency, well over 20 years sober, a figurehead in Alcoholics Anonymous, being willing to let go of his ego and his stage character constantly, not just with this article, but this is a theme in Bill's writing, that he was willing to be human, willing to show the struggle of the sober alcoholic. And what a gift that is for the rest of us when our co-founder, Bill, is willing to be so honest about the human experience, what really happens behind the curtain as we stay sober day in and day out, trying to live life on life's terms with some degree of dignity. it gives a guy like me permission to mimic what Bill has done. It gives me permission to be transparent. It gives me permission to be honest with my fellows and not think that recovery is somehow about looking good. And in fact, it turns out that you got to be willing to look bad around here to eventually feel good. That one of the quickest blocks to spiritual development is to deny the problems that we know in our heart, our mind, our soul are tearing the cover off our life. Sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, this development that continues after we're sober. Because I know for myself, I knew all about the stage character when I was out there drinking. I know all about showing the world what I think I need to show the world to get what I get. But I also know a great deal about getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and almost organically, because of my default setting of selfishness and self-centeredness, picking up that old tool of developing a stage character in Alcoholics Anonymous, where I want to be perceived by my fellows, my sponsees, my sponsor, the men and women in my home group, our society as a whole. I want to be perceived a certain way. But as it said in the big book, I want to enjoy a certain reputation, but in my heart, I know I don't deserve it. I know what it's like to become confused and baffled many years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I climbed a ladder of success and got to the top and discovered, much to my chagrin, that perhaps I had my ladder on the wrong wall. And I think that for me and for a lot of the guys that I pal around with, and we talk about these sorts of honest things about how we really feel, how we really react, what our fears really are in sober living. You know, one of the things that we all admit is the least explored area of our recovery is our thought life. That it's the last, when we talk about emotional sobriety, the last frontier, one of the things we're really afraid to take a look at is our thinking. And there's good reason for that. It's probably the last thing to change and the most difficult. And when we don't even understand ourselves, it's very difficult to bring anything to God in a very accurate manner if I'm constantly taken off the path of truth by my own selfishness, my self-centeredness, my fear, my wants, my desires. You see, my reality is my truth, and that's all based on my perception. So until my perception becomes more accurate, it's going to be very difficult for me. And what can I do before I have that a more improved self-appraisal technique, where I'm able to kind of look at myself with a higher degree of accuracy? And that's where sponsorship is so vital, that we develop two things with sponsorship. One, transparency. Won't work if you're not brutally honest with your sponsor. You got to be willing to look bad with your sponsor. I mean, this is what I'm really thinking. This is how I'm really living. That's number one, transparency. Nobody can help you if they're trying to help someone that isn't standing in front of them. If I present my sponsor, my stage character, good luck. And the other thing that I have to develop almost on a daily basis and continue today is just open-mindedness. Now that's a blanket term, but with sponsorship, it's open-mindedness about this, that I'm wrong. I have to be open-minded to the possibility that my sponsor is going to say something to me that I disagree with. And if I don't have the open-mindedness to consider that perhaps I'm wrong, there's no point in being sponsored. And interestingly enough, I look at the change in my life, and like many of us that have been here a while, we look at how we came in and we look at where we're at today, our approach to life, our reaction to life, and we go, my goodness, I'm just a completely different person. How did that happen? Well, it didn't happen through our power, number one. And the other thing that I know for certain is for every little ounce of change, every incremental move towards a more spiritual way of living, there's two things. One, there had to be power other than my own involved, because I do not have the power to change myself. Very important for me to understand I've had very little to do with the good in my life, the change in my life, the resurrection in my life. Very important I understand I have nothing to do with that power is available to me, but it is not mine. The other thing that I have to keep in mind, in order for any of that to even be possible, to be able to go to God in a humble manner, I had to first be wrong about something that at one time I thought I was right about. It turns out that being wrong is the main ingredient in change. I've never worked on a problem I don't have. I've never brought a problem to God that I don't have. Why would I? So, this type of humility produced by things that we will label as failure. Oh, I got it wrong. I did it wrong. I said it wrong. These things that we label as failure turn out to be catalyst for these important ingredients in change. Humility is so important, but you come to humility through things I would label as failure. And I stopped calling things, that I stopped trying to label things so much. I remember being new and going to my sponsor with, very well armed with the facts. You remember that. You go to your sponsor well armed with the facts. And you've already practiced how you're going to lay out your case to him. And you lay it out. And almost like swatting away a fly, he barely gives it any attention. And he says, "Oh, that's okay, kid. You're just wrong." Oh my God. I remember my emotional reaction to that when I was new. It was this feeling of defeat and defense. I felt horrible and I wanted to defend myself. I don't think you heard me correctly. Let me restate my point. You need to pay attention this time. There was nothing worse in the world than being wrong. And today, I find out I'm wrong quite often. And I don't look at it negatively at all. I go, "Oh, wow, I was wrong. I didn't know that." This is exciting because now change is possible. Every time that I realize I'm wrong about something, I should become excited, because only then, in that moment of genesis, of birth, of awareness, finding out I'm wrong about something I thought I was right about, now change is possible. Now we got something to go to our sponsor and God with, don't we? So changing our attitude about things that we would have labeled or tried to defend or hide from not just the world, but from ourselves. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it. It makes me feel bad. Well, I don't feel bad about being wrong anymore, because my own experience tells me, looking back, that all the good change in my life, there was a moment there of pain, of realization, of understanding that in order to go forward, I have to know these things about myself. So the other thing I just want to throw out, and that a lot of you know this, and I throw this out because I just think it's interesting. Bill Wilson wrote this article in January 1958. And in many ways, to me, he's posing a question. And the question is the question I've asked myself many times in 29 years of sobriety. What the hell is wrong with me? Been sober for a while in AA, you've worked the steps, you sponsor a bunch of people, and you're a basket case. You go, "What the hell is wrong with me? I should be better than this by now." And in some ways, Bill's asking that question, in my opinion. And I think he wrote an answer to the question, and he starts in this article, but I think he expands it 6 months later in June of 1958 when he wrote Take Step 11. And the hints are here when he's really talking about staring at the St. Francis prayer and going, "Yep, there it is. There's the answer. Why doesn't it work?" And so if you get a chance, I'm certainly not going to dwell into that because it's not the format. If you get a chance, if you haven't read that article written in June 1958, and it's actually right in Language of the Heart, it's the next article in there, Take Step 11. Read these back to back, and you might see the continuity that I found when I did that. So I want to touch on a couple of things, and Sam's right. I could go for hours on this. But, I know other people have a lot to offer, and I'm selfish in that regard, that I don't learn anything from listening to myself. Boy, isn't that true? I've learned a lot in AA. You know what I mean? I've been sponsoring guys since I was 6 months sober. I've always been sponsored. I've gotten to really sit at the feet of amazing men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous and be able to absorb their experience, strength, and hope, which has been invaluable in my life. But having said that, the one thing I've never learned to do is carry the message to myself. You know what I mean? I need you desperately. It's so funny. If you've been here a while, you don't hear a lot new in Alcoholics Anonymous. unless it's in someone else's voice, and then it feels new again. It feels like new information. I think that's one of the obligations we have to each other. I think we're in a constant state of reminding each other what the hell we're supposed to be doing around here. I find that you do that for me. That how many times do I sit with you and listen to you and think to myself, oh, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So Bill arrives at this place and he talks about a couple of things. One, getting off the emotional roller coaster, or the emotional merry-go-round. For me, I don't know if you identify with this, but when I am living in self-will, or as the book says, an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I usually don't think so, which, by the way, if I ever made a sober t-shirt, you'll see me wearing one that says, though he usually doesn't think so, because that could be the theme of my sober life. I'm the last guy to know it, right? Everyone in my home group knows it. My wife knows it. My sponsor knows it. And then I have an epiphany and I report back to my wife, my sponsor, my home group, and they all shake their head and go, we've known that for months about you. So glad that you're finally getting a clue. But this feeling that I'm a leaf on the wind, that life is happening to me, that I am a ball of reaction rather than somebody that has what we talk so eloquently about in the 11th step, the pause. So there's a couple of things that Bill starts to talk about. How do we get off of this? Right mental conviction into right emotional result. Page 39, the big book says, for the real alcoholic, he will absolutely be able to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. We don't drink any longer. We're sober. We haven't drank in a long time. We've had the psychic change. We're placed in a position of neutrality. And I think that that's about drinking only. Spiritual direction, spiritual principle crosses all boundaries. It applies to every area of my life, not just the ingestion of alcohol. Self-knowledge. I will absolutely be unable to stop being selfish and self-centered on the basis of self-knowledge, dishonest on the basis of self-knowledge, lustful on the basis of self-knowledge, dishonest, anything you want to put in there. I have to start understanding that a head full of who I want to be, how I should act, and what I should do is comforting to me, because my ego thinks that information is power. Information is not power, but boy, does my ego like it. I like to read wordy books and engage in windy arguments. Don't you? Let me ask you this. How does your thinking strike you? Because I'll tell you how mine strikes me in the warm comfort of my mind. It's magnificent. Do you ever just sit there and think, and then you think about your thinking? Pretty smart fella. It's the only way you find out how off the mark you are is you add oxygen and audio to your thinking, and you say something to another AA member or to your sponsor, and sometimes they don't even have to react. You can hear it out loud and go, I'm crackers, But my thinking is not where the power lies. So how can I take this information that AA is trying to share with me and turn that into right action, or if you prefer, turn it into power? Because I know how to live. I've known how to live for a very, very long time. Yet dotted throughout the road of my sobriety are things I wish I hadn't done and wish I hadn't have said, and certainly wish I hadn't have felt. How many hours have I squandered in resentment? How many hours have I lost in my life to fear? How many hours have I cast away in some fruitless exercise and judgment of others? How many hours? And so knowing how to live and being introduced to the AA way of life very early in my sobriety and having all that stuff right at the front of my mind seemingly doesn't give me the ability to do anything about it. Even then, as we hew away, peace and joy may still elude us. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm working hard. There's nothing worse than feeling that you're working hard and not getting any results. I think that's a fate worse than death. And let me tell you what working hard and not getting results can look like if you're a guy like me. I come to AA and I have a couple of lists in my mind that I don't know I have. AA suggests that I get rid of my old ideas. It suggests I get rid of those old ideas because they can kill me. And what's an old idea? Well, it's everything I brought to AA. Well, it can't all be wrong. No, but I got to be open-minded to the fact that it could all be wrong, and then we'll go through those and figure out what's worth keeping and what's not keeping. So the problem with a lot of this stuff is it's without my permission. I don't even know I have it. You see, I'm a low bottom drunk. I have a lot of trouble in my life when I get here. You know, I got warrants for my arrest. I'm hopelessly in debt. I'm living at my sister's house. Haven't worked in a car. You know, I got a good low bottom. I got a good, like, boy, this guy's ready for sobriety, low bottom. And the problem with that is you sit there when you're new and you fantasize about your trouble, because that's all you think about when you got a good low bottom. You go, man, how did I mess up my life so thoroughly and completely with no outside help? I did this all on my own. Not only did I do it on my own, but I did it surrounded by people that love me, that were trying to arrest my forward progress into hell. Boy, you got to get your shoulder into your alcoholism to make a mess of your life like that. But I did it. Me and King Alcohol were a hell of a destructive duel, you know? And you sit there new and you fantasize about getting out of trouble. And you got a small wish list. Look, I don't want to make the big money or drive the big iron. I don't need to find the woman of my dreams or have a career. I don't need any of that. Oh, if I could just get out of trouble. If I could get back to zero. The crappy job and a crappy apartment and crappy friends and but I wouldn't be hurting anybody and I'd be sober. It'd be enough for a guy like me. It'd be enough. I'd be so happy. And once again, I'm convinced of what it takes for me to be happy. You know what happens? You work through the steps. You go to a lot of AA meetings. You get a sponsor. They make you do a bunch of stuff you don't want to do, like call the IRS. You know what I'm saying? And you wake up one day and you're out of trouble. And it's good. It just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And I go to meetings, man, and there's tons of guys in there bringing in and they're sharing, they're sharing about the gifts of the program. Because you get to AA, the first thing you figure out is the room is filled with braggarts. You know what I mean? Bunch of show-offs. I mean, there were guys in AA talking about stuff I couldn't even imagine happening, like a valid driver's license. You know what I mean? And there's an address on the license, and if you go there, they live there. I mean, that's showing off where I come from, right? But you get through all that initial consequence stuff, and you hear men talk about getting a career and being part of a team at work. And I think, God, I've always been a taker. I've always been in it for me. I don't even know what they're talking about. And they talk about finding a woman and falling in love and having an appropriate relationship based on service and giving rather than getting. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, my track record is 0-7. I've been in 7 major relationships and every one of them blew up because of me. I don't know what you're talking about. And you talk about being returned to society and voting in elections and becoming a homeowner and, back in the game. And I just know that's never going to happen for me, But time goes by in Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm working with others. I'm going to meetings. I'm taking sponsor direction. I'm working the steps. And I don't remember working on any of that stuff. I don't remember waking up one day and going, I want a career yet. One day I woke up and I realized I had a career. I was making good money and I was respected where I worked. And I went to work with the right attitude. One day I woke up and sleeping peacefully next to me in the bed was the woman of my dreams who I loved like good poetry. And I don't remember waking up one day and saying, God, today we go find her. I don't remember that ever. And I remember waking up and realizing I'd been returned to society. And I went from a guy who, when I walked down the street, if you were walking with your children, you pulled them a little closer to you. I went from that guy to a guy that my neighbors knocked on my door when they needed help because they knew I would help. I voted in elections. I became part of the world. I became a homeowner. I became all these things that if you didn't understand alcoholism and know my past, I would be somebody that appeared to have recovered from my previous injuries. There was no sign of the trauma that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous with me that you could see with your eyes. and it was good, but I just thought it would be a little bit better. And I'm suffering from untreated alcoholism and I don't know it. Because here's what happens with a guy like me who comes in with the trouble I have, and you add these things to his life that are positive and take away the trouble in his life, his ego rebuilds itself. And my ego was massive. And I thought that meant that I thought well of myself. I thought that meant that I thought I was better than you. That's not how my ego gets me. What my ego does is it tells me that I better pay attention because I have a lot to lose. I better pay attention because now this is important. And spiritual development and my conscious contact with God gets nudged into the back seat. And it is so subtle, I don't even feel the nudge. I think I'm being responsible. I think I'm being prudent. And what I'm actually doing is I'm living in fear. And I know what it's like to become irritable, restless, and discontent, yet have an ego that's been developed to the point that I can no longer see it or accept it when my sponsor points it out. I remember being 7, 8, 9 years sober, laying in bed at night, unable to sleep, going, well, the job's going great, got plenty of money in the bank. Everybody tells me how well I'm doing. That's good. I'm respected in AA. I sponsor a bunch of guys that love my home group. That's going good. My wife says she's not going anywhere, says she's happy and she loves me. That's going good. If it's any better, I go in the backyard and hang myself. And what do you do when all your dreams come true? Those lists of fulfillment, you check all the boxes off and you're not happy, joyous, and free. And you're irritable, restless, and discontent. And you're an extreme example of self-will run riot, but most importantly, you don't think so. And my sponsor's saying simple things to me, like you're living in untreated alcoholism, and I'm tennis racketing away that from him. That's not it. And I think he doesn't understand. I think AA doesn't understand. I begin to suspect there's something deeper at foot here than alcoholism. There's something much deeper than good old alcoholism, that there must be something wrong with me. The basis of this whole article is returning, and Bill was, over 20 years sober, and it's about getting back to basics. I'll tell you a couple of things that I'm going to stop that I thought were interesting. I was 15 years sober, and I went to a clubhouse meeting. I was meeting a new guy there who, as they not often, but occasionally do, he didn't show up. It was one of those where, can I see you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, when can you meet? Well, I can meet you at the noon meeting. It's a meeting I normally don't go to, but I figured we'd hook up. And so he doesn't show up. So I'm going to stay for the meeting. And it's a noon meeting. You get a lot of new guys at new meetings because not back to work yet. And I'm sitting there, my shiny 15 years, and they call on this one guy to share. And he tells a story about, leaving the halfway house that morning and full of regret because, while he was out in this last run, his grandfather died and he wasn't available and he missed a funeral. And he was thinking about that morning. And then he heard this screeching overhead and he looked up and there was a hawk circling around and around. And he goes, and I remembered my grandfather's spirit animal was a hawk. And I knew that was my grandfather telling me that it was going to be okay. And it was a real God shot. And I judged the heck out of this newcomer. I thought, oh, okay, so God's sending hawks now to let you know Grandpa loves you. And I'm laughing at this guy. Like, oh, those newcomers, they're so wacky, God shot. And a couple of guys later, this guy shares and he talks about being broke and living at the halfway house and never having money for cigarettes and having to go to AA and bum cigarettes. And God, I hate being a bum. And I was thinking about that on the way down to the meeting, who I was going to bum cigarettes from and what a loser I am. And right there in the ground, there's a $20 bill. I look to the left and there's nobody there. I look to the right, there's nobody there. And I know God sent me that $20 bill so I could buy smokes today and not feel like a loser for one day. And it was a real God shot. Now I'm really judging the heck out of the newcomer. Like, oh, yeah, God's an ATM. He's sending you $20 to keep your pride in check. Oh, newcomers, they're so adorable when they're new, aren't they? And a little voice in my head says, hey, Don, when's the last time you got a God shot? I spent the rest of that meeting trying to remember the last time I got a God shot, and I couldn't figure it out. And like a splinter in my mind, it got under my skin and I couldn't stop. Days go by and I'm thinking about it. Why are these newcomers getting the God shots? Why isn't God throwing any my way? It's so obvious, the answer, isn't it? And it came to me in meditation a couple days later. Well, Don, they're looking for God. I had gone from a guy that when I was new, I was looking for God. And when I looked for him, I found him everywhere. Every area of my life, everywhere I went. I either found him directly or saw where he had been. And it was constant. And it was miraculous. And it was inspiring. And I wondered what had happened to that guy. And I wondered why these new guys who don't know the big book, don't sponsor anybody, their life is in disarray, their shoes are on fire, they burn their life down so completely, yet their spiritual condition, in my opinion, compared to my 15 years, is superior. Because they have the mind of the beginner and they're open-minded to the possibility. And why is that? Because they don't know if it's true. They don't know if it's true. And I remembered being new in AA and being introduced to this idea of God, this higher power, God of my own understanding, whatever you want to call it, you introduced me to it. And I remember thinking, it better be true. Because if it's not true, I don't have another plan. And I dared to hope that this power you talked about was real. And somewhere along the line, I became spoiled. It's interesting. The long form of the 12th tradition talks about living in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us. This to the great end that our many great blessings will never spoil us, right? And my great blessings had spoiled me. I had taken the good life for granted. And worse than that, I had taken credit for it. And I want to be clear, these are things that happen without my permission when I'm in a self-centered state. This is the need for the self-centered ego to justify itself. Look what I have done. And what that does, I think it makes me feel good about myself. Well, what's wrong? What's wrong with feeling good about accomplishment? Nothing if it's yours. But I know for a fact that God accomplished the miraculous in my life. He did for me what I couldn't do for myself. What is that? Everything. I mean, come on, what are the odds? I get to AA at age 31, and here's my history. Lose, lose, fail, lose, fail, fail, lose, fail, fail, lose. And what? You think I figured it out? You think I developed power suddenly because I can? And I take credit for it. And it's one of the easiest ways for me to stop my spiritual development. And what happens for me is I stop living one day at a time the way that we're supposed to live one day at a time. You see, when I'm new, one day at a time means if I go to bed sober, I've had a successful day in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's true. But that changes when you're here a little while and you realize that I can have a magnificent spiritual day today, and it's absolutely of no value tomorrow. Because my spiritual structures are built out of sand on a beach, and at night, God sends the waves in. And in the morning, I have a choice. It's the only choice a guy like me gets. Who am I going to serve today? Because I'm going to serve somebody, bet your bottom dollar. I'm going to serve God and his kids, or I'm going to serve self, but somebody's getting served. And that choice I make will determine the quality of my life one day at a time. And so what do? We get up and we stick with the basics. What's the first direction? I mean, I wake up every day. This is how I know I'm still selfish and self-centered. It's the easiest way for me to tell. Every day I wake up thinking about me. Not necessarily bad or anything, just thinking about me. It's my default setting, spring-loaded, undirected thought life, no God in my life, where I'm in self. And what's the first direction in the 11th step? Upon awakening, we ask God to direct our thinking. You think Bill Wilson knew what he was talking about? You think he knew that that was the first thing I had to do? I don't even have the power to make the turn to God on my own. I have to ask God to direct my thinking. And I don't know that. So I got to get back to basics, don't I? And let me tell you, my life started to turn around probably at 11 years sober. But the process did not happen. And I'm not done. I want to be very clear. It's a moving target. You know, I had a good day today. It doesn't mean I'll have a good day tomorrow. A lot of it has to do with my approach. And I think that's why Bill talked about making yourself ready to receive love and give love. In order to do that, my spiritual condition has to be in place. I took all the energy. I started because I had a complete failure at 11 years sober, blew up my marriage, was suicidal, didn't think I could go on. And I had to start over without taking a drink. And, but I mean, I had to have everything start over, had to re-examine everything, go through the steps with a fresh mind, and had to stop playing around. I had to fire my stage character in AA. I had to be willing to be transparent. And I had to start doing what we really talk about here, which was serving God and his kids. It became the only thing that mattered. And I'd love to tell you that because of that, everything started to be perfect in my life. Oh no, I've had a life, I've had every success you can have and every failure, every joy and every heartache. I mean, it's a human experience. But I'll tell you what I've been content. I don't care about being happy. Happy's a moving target, but I've been content. And Shakespeare talks about the sleep of the just, being able to lay your head on the pillow at night and sleep. And that's what AA promises us, that we're not going to feel we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. But these things, this emotional sobriety that we talk about, I'll talk about step 6 and 7 for a second, because I think that this ties in. I spent a lot of time in my first 10 years of sobriety working on me. And I got pretty good at it. I looked good. And what I mean by that is if you saw me, you'd say, that guy's a good example. He's going places. He's doing well in his life. Look where he started. And people in AA would say that. This is a hint that maybe there was a problem with that. One night, I'm driving home from a meeting with my wife, Eileen, who's a 28-year sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Terrific. Some of you know her, terrific lady. And not in an insulting manner, just in an observational manner, she says this to me. She says, I wish you treated me at home the way you treat me at an AA meeting. And I'm like 10 years sober. And I go, what are you talking about? And she goes, I just like the way you treat me when there's witnesses. And she was not taking my inventory, trying to be me. She just noticed that when there were people around, I was more affectionate. When there were people around, I was friendlier. When there were people, now that doesn't say something about stage character. I don't know what does. Well, I'm here to report, I think I treat my wife better when you're not around today than when you are. But I use that as an example that I wasn't even aware of that. This is how subtle the ego can be. And I put a lot of effort into what I thought was 7th and 6th step work. And what it really was is me working on me. But what happens when I work on me with my power, I'm good at building false idols. Because, well, let's face it, I played God for most of my life. What is a bigger false idol than playing God? So what I'm good at is developing a good stage character that the world can see. I stopped doing that. I stopped working, and I stopped thinking that step 6 and 7 had absolutely anything to do with me other than to go to my creator with true humility and go, hey, Pop, here's what's going on. And I know, and you know, I can't do anything about it. So you get back to me and let me know what you're going to do about it, if anything. And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to go help your kids. And I started putting the effort that I was putting into fixing myself into improving my conscious contact with God as I understood him. And a funny thing happened. These character defects that were choking me out, where my main spiritual tool in my life was what? Restraint. Let me tell you, restraint is a spiritual tool, but it's only a spiritual tool to create stop to get to the real tools that change. But when restraint is all you have, you're creating a pressure cooker. And that's all I had. So I was constantly under tension. And so what I started to try to do was simply live in a space talked about in the 11th step, which is what? create the pause. Turns out that that's God's address, the pause. His language is silence. So I'm trying to create pause and silence, not just in the morning and at night, but many times throughout my day. Reminding myself I no longer run the show, creating pause and silence, which allows me to ask the only question that matters in any situation. What would God have me do? Now, if I'm willing to take action based on the answer I get, and I will get an answer because AA promises me that I have an unsuspected inner resource. What I'm looking for, I'm looking with. God is already here. Ask the question. If I'm willing to take action based on the answer, what would God have me do? I don't even have to be right. I could be wrong. Doesn't matter. In that moment or moments, my character defects are instantaneously removed. And you know what I appear to be to other people? And you know what I feel like to myself in those moments? I feel emotionally sober. There is something about not running the show that directly equates to feeling emotionally sober. Think about what kind of a world we would live in if we all got up in the morning and we did a couple of things. One, we played the spiritual game that whatever happens today is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's not good. It's not bad. It's exactly the way it's supposed to be. That's number one. Number two, if that every interaction we had with another one of God's kids was actually a divine appointment, that there were no mistakes, that whoever I found in front of me at that moment in time, whether it was my wife or a coworker or the girl getting me coffee at the coffee stand, whoever is standing in front of me is there by divine appointment. And I have spiritual business with that person. My job is to serve them. What kind of a world would we live in if everybody got up and went out in the world to serve each other and was convinced that this divine power we talk about endlessly in AA put them there for that purpose in time? What kind of a world would we live in? Now, let me tell you, I can't speak for the rest of the world, nor do I run the show, so it's none of my business. But I'll tell you what's happened to me in those moments, those hours, those days, or even longer, where I've been able to take that spiritual breath and hold it as I move through my life, thinking that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be and my job is to serve. I'm emotionally sober. I think I have made too heavy going of this thing for a long time because I think the answer lies in intellect and understanding. Forgetting that AA is not of the mind, it's of the spirit. This is not academic. This is spiritual, not of the head, but of the heart. So the approach is very simple. When I serve you, and I feel the most important thing in the world is serving you, and I'm doing it with a glad heart, then my character defects don't stand a chance. And I appear to be and feel to myself emotionally sober. I feel like a grown-up, and I'm excited about what comes next. So I hope we continue as AA members into this new frontier. I think this is a terrific meeting that you've put together where people can start to, kick this can down the road a little bit. I think a lot of us do this in our sponsorship families, and we certainly do with the people that we sponsor, because what are we talking about, right? When they call us or we call them, right? Whether I'm calling my sponsor or one of my guys is calling me, what are we really talking about except the human experience? And the guys I talk to all have a theme. We all have the same theme. My life is so good. If the newcomer version of myself was to show up in my life and listen to the things I'm complaining about, he'd kick me in the rear end. Why can't I feel it? And I think that is what alcoholism's real muscle is. We talk about irritable, restless, and discontent. Here's my definition of untreated sober alcoholism. I have a complete inability to experience joy in a sober state. Think about that juggernaut. When there's nothing wrong in your life, but you feel like something's wrong in your life. It's the one thing that we lay in bed and we can't figure out. We try to find that itch that we can't scratch. You know, we do well when things are wrong. We do well with a bad medical diagnosis, a broken heart, a reversal of fortune. Give us something to point to say, that's why I'm screwed up. But what makes alcoholics like me crazy is when there's nothing wrong, but I feel like something's wrong. And that's the muscle of alcoholism. That's what over a protracted period of time will take a guy like me back to the grinder, back to the desperate experiment. And I'll never be cocky about my alcoholism. I know that this stuff is important because if you stay in that place of gray where the color has left the picture because you can't experience joy, there's always going to be some part of my memory, hidden as it may be, that remembers what makes the big hurt go away. I don't want to kid myself. You know, I know what alcohol did to me, but I also know what it did for me. And I have a lot of respect for King Alcohol and the power that had in my life at one time. And if I have respect for what happened to me, then I better have respect for the power that's the solution. Anything I'm doing in my time in Alcoholics Anonymous, in my life, that isn't about connecting with that power is a fool's errand. Spiritual malady is overcome. I straighten out both mentally and physically. And I forget that. And I have to come to you so you remind me the order of approach. God first, people second, me third. You told me that when I was new, but I come back so you can remind me. Sam, thanks for inviting me. I'm going to stop it right there.
Don, man, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. What about the deer story, man? Can you work that in? Can you tell me the deer story? Or you're not feeling the deer story tonight?
You know what, Sam? I'm not a trained SEAL. You can't bang a fish on the deck and have me perform for you, Sam.
Dance monkey.
Dance monkey, yeah.
Hey, so this is how we do this. We usually will have the person who's moderating. You see the screen, so you obviously can see the Hollywood squares here. Pick on 2 or 3 people, and then we'll raise our hands for whoever wants to share or has any questions.
Okay. Hey, Gary B., you want to share?
Okay, thanks, Don. That was great. Yeah, what you touched on there, it was kind of later on, is all the things you were talking about. A friend of mine named Matt and I will talk about the power of the pause and how that has saved our necks any number of times over the years when we're thinking. And it's just one of those things that's always stayed with me so much. My life today has changed substantially from long before. My wife's illness keeps me home most of the time anymore because I can really be helpful there in that. And sometimes that goes real well. And sometimes I'm just a real jerk about how I deal with it. But it seems to kind of be putting along. And I actually got a plan for tomorrow morning where I'm going to go to an AA meeting with real people with me there. I haven't done that for well over a year now. And so I'm going to, I've got shot up, masked up, and done all that other thing. By God, I'm going to the meeting. So thanks a lot, Don. That was great. I loved it.
Thanks, Gary. Love you, buddy.
Love you.
Thanks, Gary.
Veronica, would you like to share with us?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Don. My name's Veronica and I'm an alcoholic. You know, wow, that was jam-packed full of stuff. And 2 of the things that, I mean, there's lots of stuff, but 2 of the things I'm really pleased that you gave, you told us about your experience when you were listening to those newcomers and the judgment that you were making around it. And that was, I don't know, that really appealed to me. And I guess it's partly dovetailed with what I'm going to say next, is that I, every now and then where I feel it's appropriate in a meeting, I, you know, despite my behaviors, despite my valiant efforts at sobriety and emotional sobriety, I know the difference between my voice and the voice. And every now and then I share a little snippet in a meeting, and I kind of cringe because I think people are just going to think I'm like, I'm 4 years sober, by the way, that I'm just, that I don't know, that I'm just imagining things. But I recognize in myself the intellect and the understanding, regardless of what I've read, regardless of what I'm trying to practice, regardless of what I'm taking to my sponsor, as transparently as possible, because that's the only way that it can be addressed, cards on the table, is that I still live in intellect and understanding. And I'll tell you, I was told, that voice told me, and it must have been, I don't know, maybe at 4 or 5 months sober, I'm sitting in the rooms and the voice says to me, there is nothing left to figure out, just experience. And do you think I would lead with that on a daily basis? No, I'm still busy, understanding and intellectualizing things, so I love this meeting. I love the speakers that Sam brings to the meeting. It gives me guidance. It gives me hope. It gives me examples of what to watch for, what to listen for. I am quite sure that I can well and truly be one of those people that, my egoic structure and my ego will be, like Legos, they will be, they're always in place, they'll just start building up and building up, that castle tower. And it's great to hear it over and over again, to watch for when things start going well. I notice it even now, even at 4 years. I just want to say thank you. That's it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Veronica. Don, you want to pick one more and then we'll open her up?
Absolutely. I thought you were taking over, Sam.
One more.
I was before I could even thank Veronica. Hey, Sam, why don't you share? I want to hear about your emotional sobriety.
Oh, man. I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic. And, it's been my great privilege to be a part of this workshop. We originally started it with just the guys that I sponsor, and it was a way for us to talk about where the ego was reemerging in our life. And it's like that Harry Tiebout quote where he said that the alcoholic ego, or the recuperative power of the alcoholic ego, would be comic if it weren't so tragic. And it's amazing to me. One of the parameters we talk about, the bedevilments on page 52, and one of the things that I'm really aware of in my prayer and meditation life, my 11th step life, and my nightly review is, am I being joyous? Is that something that's a barometer? Like there's a lot of people, and you see a lot of these grouchy, dry drunks, or a lot of these guys who are super self-righteous in meetings, or some of these guys who are 30 years sober and they just look miserable as shit, and they're yelling out instructions to people on how to live. And I realized that I can be that guy. One of the things that was always that's been really a big growth process for me in the last couple of years is really trying to surrender and let go of that approval seeking behavior and just being honest, it's almost like I really have come into who I am a little bit, a lot, and I'm really starting to lay down the mask, and it's taken 20 something years to do that. And it's a lot like you said. I mean, a lot of times I strengthen my ego by trying to work on myself, as opposed to having some humility and some honesty and just letting God pull it away. And, I would say my current experience, it's funny, I can run a meeting on faulty emotional dependencies for approval and be sitting around thinking how everybody liked the speaker and how the meeting's going. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, come on, man. Make sure everybody's really entertained and really likes it and really likes what's going on here. How long is this going to last? Is everybody getting bored with this reading? And, the truth is, I've been given a lot of thought somehow, in the fear part of the big book, I believe it's on page 68. He says, just do we do to the extent that we do as he would have us, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? We are in that part where it says we are in the world to play the role he assigns. And I've started working and considering that word role and that assignment. And I don't know why it's taken me so long to get to, but for a long time in my prayer and meditation, I was still kind of seeking God's assistance for my objective in the day, right? I was still kind of seeking God's assistance for my objective in my life. And I was still trying to author my life. And I think that there's been many surrender experiences that I've had, but the best have come when I don't have any more plans for my life, no more objective except for to do what God wants me to do in all these areas. And now that looks like a day at a time. It's not so much a future thing. It's like, it really is. And you hear all these people talk about living in the present and all that. But I really am coming into that thing where I'm really saying, what's the best I can do to serve you, God, in the day that I'm in? How can I be an agent for you? Direct me. Whatever you want me to do in my business, whatever you want me to do in my marriage, whatever you want me to do in this thing. And I really, for a long time, I would tell you, I feel like my job is to serve God and help others, but I was trying to get my needs met all the time. That's all I was always trying to get my needs met. Like if you asked me what I thought about life, I'd say the purpose of life is to serve God and help others. And you asked me what I was thinking about, or you could take a projector screen into what I was thinking about and have shit to do with that, right? It was about how to get rich, laid, and get some approval. That was what it was about for a long time. And I don't like to admit that, but that's what it was. It was very shallow. And I did a lot of things, but I finally had some real freeing things over the last couple of years. And a couple of things really broke my ego down where I was just like, you know what? I want to serve whatever you want me to do, God. Whatever you want me to do in this area of my life, let me do it. And I feel that reemerge. One of the barometers, or one of the symptoms of that reemergence of the ego and me trying to get my needs met, all of a sudden just comes up like carbon monoxide in my life. Before I know it, I'm just breathing it in and it's killing me, and I'm self-run right. One of the barometers I can notice is I'm miserable. I'm miserable with money. I'm miserable with a great partner. I'm miserable with getting all the stuff that I want. I'm sick of her. I'm sick of it. I don't make as much as that guy makes. I don't do this. I should be in the Caribbean. I booked a vacation and it's fucking raining 2 days of the week. How am I supposed to deal with that? Why, I don't like the person. I don't like this person's attitude. I have, my stomach hurts and I just, I'm trying to take a nap, but I have to piss. I mean, it's just, I'm always a dog that can't find its spot. Just an angry, whiny, miserable human being. And I found that there is, when I'm in the right position, there's something that happens for me where, and I can tell from in meditation in the morning, when I go from what am I going to do? How am I going to get my needs met? To all of a sudden, all right, God, what do you have in store for me today? And I live in that joyful anticipation, like I feel that anticipation of like, oh man, this is going to be adventure. I'm excited. I'm so busy wanting what I have, and I'm not worried about not getting what I don't get, or not what I'm not getting. I kind of butchered that quote, but it's I stole it from somebody, I don't remember, but it's true, where you're just so busy wanting what you have. You like spending time with people. And today I also can listen a little more. Like, it's just amazing. I mean, I could be in front of a lot of people and be nodding my head and not listen to shit. I don't know. I came like a really good parrot. Like, I didn't listen to anything. All I was doing was waiting. I picked up a few fragments of what you said so that I could respond to it and make myself look cool. That's what I did for a long time. And today this has really helped me. And I think that, like you said, it's not some new mystical Gnostic sect of AA. It just, presenting it in a different way, and presenting it, what's it look like now that I'm 20 something years sober, and go right back to the same stuff I did when I'm drunk, right back to, the solution that's outlined in the big book. But I enjoy this. So I really appreciate you speaking tonight, Don. Thanks for calling on me.
Thanks, Sam. Raise hands now.
Yeah, I'll just raise hands. And a lot of times people don't want to share after somebody shares for that long time. They're just kind of sinking in, like after a movie a little bit. So you got to thump them. But you don't have to do that. I'm sure. Thanks for coming. I'll start thumping people if I don't get a thing. Oh, there we go. Heather Larkin. Heather.
Hey there. Hi, everybody. My name's Heather. I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God. Thank you so much for your share. And there's a lot of stuff that hit me. And when you talked about making those assumptions when you first wake up, like, how about I assume that this is how it's supposed to be, that everybody that I'm coming face to face with is supposed to be there, that is a divine appointment. Man, when you said that, I was like, oh, and I felt like, right. And I realized I was holding my breath. And I hold my breath when I'm trying to figure stuff out and arrange everything in the universe, right? And it's that thing of just, I'm supposed to be here. There's a reason for me to be here, and there's work to be done. And I just have to remember that it's my job to show up. Like what the share before me, like it made me remember that if I'm seeking to do the will of my higher power, I don't have to worry about my needs getting met. That's not my job. My job is to do what my higher power wants me to do. And it's never, it never hurts me. And when bad things happen, maybe that is, I was in a women's meeting earlier today, and we were on the 12 and 12 in the second step. And like, just because this, and this happens, how do I know that that's not my higher power restoring me to sanity? Because I don't know what I need most of the time. I think I know what I want. And so, and then when you talked about the 6th and the 7th step, man, I feel like that is the, I know that other people talk about, I know people talk about other steps, but that 6 and 7 that's about doing things in a new way. It's about me making an effort to do things in a new way, the way I don't want to do it. The way that's not easy, the way that's not comfortable. And as my sponsor says, if you feel uncomfortable, it's probably good. You're probably practicing new behavior. So just everything that you said, I just so appreciate it. And I was looking around I have the emotional sobriety book, and I was like, where is it? I can't find it. But you touched on so much stuff, and I'm so happy you were here to share tonight. And thank you so much. And maybe someday I'll hear the deer story. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marcia.
Thanks so much, Don, for your share. So many amazing things in there. When you were talking about not seeing the person's wrongs, and I remember years ago in work, we did some kind of workshop, and everybody would write down a wrong that they saw of somebody else, and then find their own, and nobody could find their own. And it even says there in somewhere else about how an alcoholic can't see their own irrationality, how we can't see our own craziness. And I don't know if anybody can see their own faults. And how many times have I had problems in relationships because of things I had no clue about? I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm grateful when somehow I get clued into what's going on, because I don't want to keep banging my head on a wall or somebody else's and, dealing with the same frustrations. So, and then, the thing about the intellectualism and yeah, I'm definitely one of those intellectual people that, Ivy League college and all that. And I think I know everything. And I intellectualized myself into a psych hospital, 5 years ago now? Because I thought I knew better than the doctors and all the rest of the stuff. And I could get away with taking these drugs and doing this thing and I'd be fine. And, it outkilled me. And that was the start of my journey, where I had a revelation at that point. Without a doubt, there was a higher power, and a higher power that I'd been looking for all my life, in all kinds of churches and places, and never found it, never saw any of those experiences. But once I had it, I started looking back And now I realize they were there, but I just couldn't see them for what they were. You know, and other thoughts about, you know, when things are good, if I'm doing God's will, I don't have some, it's like, I don't have that adrenaline high that I think I live with. You know, I definitely think I'm like an adrenaline junkie. And so I always had to have that high, and I always had to have that crazy experience of living on the edge of, you know, doing something bad or good or crazy or new or whatever. But now if I'm living according to what God wants me to do or trying to, yeah, things are good. It's not a 10, it's not a 1, it's probably a 5. And I can look and sometimes say, this is boring, you know? And being an adrenaline junkie and being okay with boring, I have to remind myself and say, just, it's okay. Just sit and be and pause and figure out what I can do for somebody else, you know? And I don't have near the drama and the craziness, and, you know, relationships are getting better, and it's all okay. It all is. And, you know, I loved what you said too. I'd heard before about if everybody, you know, in the planet woke up in the morning and said, God, what can I do? You know, how can I serve you today? Wouldn't it be a wonderful place? Without a doubt, absolutely. I am grateful that I finally did get landed into this program, and I'm learning the ways of it. Not perfect for sure, but I'm so grateful to be here and to have met all the amazing people, and to be on Zoom where I can meet people from all over the world. So thanks for sharing, and thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing. And Laura, I didn't mean to jump over you, from Texas. Laura.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura, and I'm an alcoholic. And what we do here in Texas, truly by the grace of God, I've been sober since April the 6th, 1987. I loved your share, Dawn. I've about 3 months ago, I heard you and you were sharing, and I thought, and something just struck me and it bothered me. And tonight it got clarified. So when I was about 6 years sober, my dad was about 8 years sober. Best job he'd ever had. Mom's in Al-Anon, family's in recovery, going to meetings. And they moved. And he moved to a place from a big book sort of environment to somewhere where they weren't doing that. And he became the guy with the answer in the meeting. And the problem with being the guy with the answer in the meeting is that you can't be the guy that has the problem. And you said that so well tonight about being able to be transparent, right? And with almost 9 years of sobriety, he took his life and he was sober. And I think what you said tonight just nailed it, because it was everything that was, all the excuses for what was wrong were gone, right? The job is good. The drinking has stopped. The marriage is good. The kids are okay. The finances are good. Why am I so miserable? Right. And the key, I think, to all of that is this self-knowledge, right? I'm going to figure it out. And for me, that was the other thing that you said that was so wonderful tonight. And I talk about it all the time, was that key for all of this for me is step 1, but not around the drinking, right? Everything else, right? I have to concede that I don't have any power, period, right? I've been given the power to help others. That's it. And that's after I've done the work. And so this sense of just going through the day going, I don't know, right? I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what anybody's supposed to be doing. And being okay there, and just even joyful there, is such a shift. But I'm very grateful that we're talking about it so much more. And I think it is for people like me who've been sober a little while to be able to sit around and check ourselves. And like Sam was saying, how are we doing? But there's a bigger message for people like my dad who are going to meetings and sponsoring people, and they think they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, and they haven't quite got the whole truth. Right? They haven't quite got the whole message about the spiritual malady. And the funny part tonight, it clicked, because after my dad died, I had a red-tailed hawk. So when you were talking about judging the newcomer, he's talking about, oh, God showed up with a hawk. I was like, I'm that guy. That's me. I'm the one talking about like, oh, look, there's a hawk. And there's my dad, right? And it's a joke in our family every time we see a hawk where everybody goes, hey, daddy. And so I really appreciate the way that you're able to articulate and be transparent about the truth about the real alcoholic, because for me, the drinking really was a symptom. And it really is about, I listen to I listen to this guy all the time, but Rabbi Taub, and he said in a talk, I don't know, it's like a month ago when he said it, I thought, how did it take so long for me to hear that phrase? He said, we are called to do God's work, not God's job. And God's work is help his kids. God's job is manage the universe, right? I want to be the manager of the universe and joyful. These two things are incompatible, right? I cannot, for whatever reason, run the world and be content at the same time. And so the other thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is it fascinates me, and you also spoke to this tonight, that Bill Wilson is able to write this at this stage. And I think Father Dowling probably played a huge role in his ability to have this awareness about himself, because all of the little ability that I have to have emotional sobriety is a direct result of good sponsorship. And having that person that I turn myself into, that could continually bring me back to, if you're uncomfortable, you're the problem. If you're uncomfortable, you're the problem, over and over and over. And so I think the fact that Bill Wilson was able to sort of put this down at the head of the pack, so to speak, really is divine. And we're so blessed that he did it. And I thought you just did a tremendous job tonight sharing with us about that. And I'm very grateful I was able to be here. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. So glad you came tonight. Dawn L. Hey, Dawn.
Hi, Sam. How are you? I thank you so much, Dawn L, for sharing. That's fun. I got so much out of what you said, and I have been really, this week, I've really been looking forward to this meeting. And because last week I was struck by something in it, and I've been sort of carrying it around all week. And I'm going to read it. It's straight out of the reading. And it says, and I'm going to put it in the now, and I'm going to put it in the me, which is because over the years, I have undergone a little spiritual development. The absolute quality of my frightful dependence is becoming starkly revealed to me, reinforced by what grace I can secure in prayer. I'm finding that I have to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off my faulty emotional dependencies upon people, upon AA, and indeed upon any set of circumstances whatsoever. And I've been in that place because, you know, if I'm running the acid test on joy that Sam's throwing out there, I'm failing miserably. And I think the reason is because I have had a few faulty emotional dependencies taken out of my hands. And it's been a promising opportunity for me to live in the I don't know one more time. And I think that that's the beauty of the newcomer that can see the hawk, is they haven't determined yet how things should be. And they're still in, oh, wow, ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing. It's just like, ain't it? We're so glad it's over, you know? And what came to me while you were sharing through a few things that you said was that whole thing with sponsor transparency. And I was, you know, my sponsor says to me a lot, watch what you defend. And what I defend more than anything else are the things that I want, you know, my way on. And so that was something. The other thing that I've been curious about recently is, you know, I'm kind of being tugged, prodded, nudged, thrown into some place that I'm not familiar with yet sober. And I do believe that it is a place of spiritual development. And I do believe that another thing that my sponsor says that is very promising to me is I made the mistake of listening. When I did a third step, I really did a third step. And because of that, I get the opportunity to grow along spiritual lines. But the facts are that a lot of my spiritual growth comes contingent on cutting away of the things that I most think are going to make me feel good. And then they get removed, and I'm standing there and, the wind stops blowing. But I loved what you said about when you have what you want, you live where you want, your situation around you is pretty much what you want. If I was the newcomer that walked into my life, I'd be like, holy cannoli, winner, chicken dinner. But the facts are that I am clear through two-way prayer, through continuous journaling, through transparency with a sponsor, that I'm being asked to go further. The problem is I don't know where it's at. And I have to walk blindly into the next frontier. And it's a frontier that I have no understanding of what it means or where it's going, which is the same thing that happened to me when I got sober. I did not know how to live life without a pool stick and a couple drinks in me. That was how I lived. And, I hustled, I did all these things. And when I got sober, I was like, oh my God, how do you do this? And I've had a few of the, the situations and circumstances shift around on me, particularly through COVID. I don't know. I think a lot of us have gone through a lot of change in the middle of COVID, wherein my values have changed. And for me, it's not so much about what I do. It's what I'm being on a daily basis. Am I being a grump? Am I being of service? Am I being a God-centered person? Am I being conscious? Am I being conscionable? All these things that I want to be, honest, thorough, all this stuff. When in fact, most mornings I wake up and I am so in that time of God, please direct my thinking. Because my thinking by the end of the day, there's an emptiness about it that I know isn't pure. And I want to go further. I really want to go further. But I have to walk palms up with the humility to just say, I don't know. I don't know what to do next. And frankly, I have the great fortune of having tremendous sponsorship. And she's like, well, why don't we just see what happens tomorrow? And I'm like, okay, where's my guarantee? I want a certificate of some nature that says that this is going to pay off. And, but the truth is I've had enough experience to know that that's true. The other thing that has been really echoing in my mind, it just continues to echo in my mind lately, is instead of regarding myself as an intelligent agent, I believe that my human intelligence is the last word, the beginning and the end. Rather vain of me, isn't it? When in fact, when I look at what's going on in the world around me, it's incredibly childish. But I think I know what's going on a lot of the times, as opposed to maybe I turn myself in the morning to be used as that intelligent agent. I'm so happy you shared. I got a lot out of what you shared. You and I have been around about the same amount of time. And it's a promising thing for me to know that we're continuing, that we are absolutely continuing, and that I want to continue. And if there aren't people continuing shoulder to shoulder with me, what's the point? What's the point? Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much. A lot of people in my sponsorship tree and on here, and a lot of people I admire, Kenny and all those guys, they all smudge people, like they have Smudge and Sage and, Don Coyas, all those guys. And I grew up listening to that. So I had Sage and all that, but to really, if you really want to be a good smudger, you've got a good feather, right? And it has to be given to you. You can't just buy a feather. And I was on a walk a little while back. This hawk thing that you guys are talking about maybe reminded me of this. I was on this beautiful walk right when COVID started. I was on a run, and then I walked. I got this hike, and I saw this feather laying across here and all these white stripes on it. And I put a little picture on Instagram like, hey, this looks like a hawk feather. I mean, it can't be a crow feather. It's way too big for any of these, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, I'm just like, this is definitely a hawk feather, and I'm going to be smudging people with this, And then one of my buddies posted, that's a turkey feather, you dumbass. Anyway. I still have it though, because it's a pretty feather, but it was a turkey feather. I was hoping it was a hog feather. Anyway, so Don, do we have anything you can think of that maybe you may want to add
Nothing
before we quit?
Nothing want to add. It's been a great night. Got nothing but love for you.
All right. I hope you had as much fun as we did.
Absolutely.
And why don't we, the way we do this is we just mute ourselves and go to our inner room and say the Lord's Prayer to ourselves. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for a great night. Thanks for a great meeting. Much
Thank you,
love.
Don. That was fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Wonderful.
Thank you, Don.
Guys,
Thank
and thanks
you.
again, Don.
Thank you.
Good to
Great
see you.
meeting.
Bye.
Great meeting. Great
Thanks
meeting.
a lot.
Thanks.
That was wonderful.
Hey, Sam, can you clarify where the recording is? I think Don put it in the
So-
chat. It's a
Yes.
Facebook
So-
page.
So it's in the Fox family Facebook page, like if you're friends on that, but you can also, I put it in the chat, my email address. If you're not part of that, you can go to samglenn@comcast.net and send a request and just ask me what recording you want and I'll send it to you. And that's
Thank you.
samglenn with 2 N's at comcast.net.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And Lynn, I'm sorry we didn't get to you tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to get to you next week if you can join us.
Oh, that's okay. I usually forget after about a minute anyway. So it's no, actually, could you tell me again, Sam Glenn spelled how?
SAMGLENN at comcast.net.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks,
For coming
Don.
tonight.
Don, appreciate the talk, man. One of the books I listened to was called The Power of Silence. And it had a lot to do with what you were talking about, that being that pause. But it's more important just to be quiet so we can hear what God has to say. And I think Henry Talbot said, also that, until we get to that place where we hear the voice of reality or the voice of truth in silence, and that's, where I find God at, it's pretty cool to hear it though. I really loved your talk.
Thanks, Charles.
Tom, thanks for my book, man. I started it tonight. Good stuff.
Cool.
All right. Much love, guys. I'll see you. Thank you, Don. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you had some other stuff, and I appreciate you showing up, bud. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you,
Don,
man.
good to see you. Thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks, Don. It was fantastic. Really great.